Hello, it's Dr. Gianna Reams, and this is part two of Who Killed Philip of Macedon. Um, just again, a reminder, we stopped last time with the precursors leading up to Philip's death. Some of the politics that were going on, explained about the wedding to Cleopatra. If you did not watch that video, you will want to watch that video before you watch this one, or this one's not going to make a lot of sense. Also a reminder, please like and subscribe these videos. It helps the algorithm, gets these videos out there a little bit more. So taking up with that, Alexander is now back in Pella. He has been recalled. Things with his father are rocky. He tried his own diplomatic advancement over to Pixodaris and Caria, and that torpedoed his father's plans to marry Arrhidaeus to this Carian. That meant Philip was without a bridgehead. And in fact, Pixodaris went running into the arms of the Persian king as a result. So this then brings us to the interlude. Philip was killed either late in July, August, maybe, and possibly more likely in the fall, in preparation for his invasion of Persia. So at the time that Philip is killed, half of the Macedonian army is already over in Asia Minor as an advance force. And they've been doing pretty well over there. They're under the control of Parmenion, who is Philip's right-hand guy. So Parmenion has got the army, and they've been kind of marching down the countryside without a lot of opposition from the Persians. So Philip, just prior to bringing the rest of the army across, has another wedding. So our story here is kind of bookended by weddings. The first one between Philip and this woman Cleopatra, his seventh and it turns out last wife, and now he is marrying Cleopatra, another Cleopatra, this time his daughter, to Alexander's uncle. Okay, Olympias's younger brother, Alexander of Epiros, of Molossus. These sorts of uncle-niece marriages were quite common, especially in the upper classes. I know squicks us today because that looks like incest to the ancient mind. It was not. Uncle-niece and first cousin were pretty common. And so this is doing a couple of things. First of all, it is repairing the apparent political breach that occurred when Alexander's mother, Olympias, was insulted at Philip's wedding. If you recall, I said Attalus stood up, prayed for a legitimate heir from his niece Cleopatra, the young Cleopatra, the other Cleopatra, which was a slam at Olympias. It was a suggestion that Alexander was not Philip's child and that Olympias had committed adultery. So this is part of why Olympias left. Now, regardless of what Alexander of Molossus, of Epiros, thought of his sister, this is an insult to the family, and so it has to be avenged. So things have gone a little cold between Philip and Alexander, and they had been friends before. So this offering of Cleopatra, Olympias's daughter, Alexander's full sister, to her uncle, is a way to kind of repair that. So he has now married off, within a year, two of his daughters, Canana to Amyntas, the cousin. So again, here we have first cousin marriage. And now Cleopatra, Alexander's full sister, to her uncle, Olympias's brother. Okay. And so the wedding is a big deal. And Philip is using this to prepare and kind of throw this big party leading to the invasion of Persia. So it's a big send-off. And he's been doing a lot of stuff leading up to this. He sent a delegation down to Delphi to ask for an oracle about this. And he's been, he started the Philippeion down in Elis at Olympia. So he's been doing a lot of stuff to kind of put himself front and center in Greece as the leader of Greece for this Pan-Hellenic crusade under the auspices of the Corinthian League, which is how he is billing it, that this is a vengeance crusade against Persia for their earlier invasion in the Greco-Persian Wars, the earlier invasion of Darius and especially Xerxes into Greece. So this is how he's playing it politically. What does he want? Loot. He wants money. Persia's rich. It's hard to know what Philip really had in mind because it gets colored by what Alexander did later. But it looks like at least he thought he could peel off Asia Minor, maybe all the way to the Euphrates from the Persians. Whether he ever intended to go further, that's a good question. But he certainly already got that advanced force over there. So there's this big wedding, okay? Now, I need to pause for just a minute and tell you about kind of as the Macedonian world turns, that sets up the next piece. Philip liked girls and boys. Like a lot of ancient Greeks and Macedonians, he swung both ways. And so he had girlfriends and boyfriends and liked them pretty and possibly dumb. So at some point much, much earlier, we're not sure how much earlier, again, we're dealing with Diodorus, and Diodorus is succinct to the point that it kind of stops making sense when we're trying to figure out what's going on and when Philip was actually in Illyria that these events could occur. So again, in the novel that I wrote, I placed these events much, much earlier in the book because it would seem that's the case. But it's possible they happened later as well. So Philip had a boyfriend named Pausanias. He is from the Orestian royal house. If that name might sound a little bit familiar, if you're a big fan of Alexander stuff, that is the same place that Perdiccas is from, Alexander's friend Perdiccas. And maybe from the royal family. We're not entirely sure who Perdiccas is, but his father Orontes was possibly, maybe even probably, the former king, Prince Basileus of Orestis, and that Pausanias belonged to that family. So he and Perdiccas may have been cousins. And in Greek formations of a lot of these relationships, one partner is older and one partner is younger. And when the younger partner starts getting a full beard, then they're kind of getting too old for it and they should become a friend and kind of step aside. And then somebody might get a new younger boyfriend in the case of Philip. So Pausanias was getting too old for it and was put aside for another boy whose name, according to Diodorus, was also Pausanias. So it gets really confusing at this point. His name may not have been. There's another possibility here. But whoever he was somehow tied into the family of Attalus, or at least was friends with Attalus. Now, who the hell is Attalus? Attalus is the uncle of Philip's last wife. So he is Philip's uncle-in-law. Now, he's also the one that insulted Alexander at that wedding. Okay. And the younger Pausanias, or whatever his name was, left a note. He was teased. So this is a case, I want to make this very clear. This Pausanias bullied a boy to death. Okay. So he teased this kid to the point that he decided to commit suicide. And he committed suicide in a way to reclaim his Tame. He is being called essentially a girl, and all kinds of nasty things, implying that he was a whore, etc. And so in order to reclaim his honor, he, according to the tale, ran out in front of Philip during the battle against Illyrians. Now that limits when these things could have happened. Is part of why in the book I made it a little earlier, but there's another possibility later as well. And that he took on his own body all of the wounds, all of the blows meant for the king. And then later died. Okay. Possibly he didn't actually intend to commit suicide. He may just have intended to look brave, and that went badly for him. But he did leave a suicide note. So obviously he understood that this could be a result of the battle. In it, he told his friend Attalus, or possibly his uncle Attalus, what he had done and why. Okay. And the reason I say possibly his uncle is that this could have been Cleopatra's younger brother or older brother. We're not entirely clear. That's interesting. Okay. So this is why Attalus cares about it. And he went to Philip and demanded that the older Pausanias be punished. And Philip didn't really do anything about it. He apparently demoted the younger Pausanias, took away his horse, which was quite an insult in Macedonian culture, and broke him down to the common areas, common foot soldier. Time passes. We don't know how much time passes, but I want to point out it doesn't really matter. People don't forget things, okay? As Beth Carney has noted in her discussion of this event. And quite possibly the next event occurred after Philip married Cleopatra. And Attalus started to get above himself, we might say. And he invited Pausanias over for a supper party. Okay. And even if some years had passed, you may think, why did Pausanias go? This is why I said Philip may have liked them pretty and dumb. But he did, and Attalus got him stupid drunk and then handed him over to the grooms to do with as they will. In other words, they raped him. Okay. And this is doubly insulting because Pausanias is if not from the actual prince, not the son of the prince, if that's Perdiccas, he's at least from that family. So he is an aristocrat. He is a nobleman. Grooms are slaves. Okay. So here's a nobleman being raped by slaves. That is horrible, absolutely awful, in terms of the insult to his tame, his personal honor. So just as he had bullied the younger kid, Pausanias or whatever his name was, to kill himself, okay, because his tame was insulted, his honor. Now, the elder Pausanias' honor has also been besmirched. And so Pausanias storms into Philip and demands that now that Philip do something, and Philip doesn't. He gives Pausanias back his station. He's puts him probably in the hypaspists, which is where he ought to be as a nobleman's son, and returns his horse and hopes that maybe this calms him down because he's returning to him his public standing. And then Philip does something else because Parmenion, I mentioned Parmenion is over in Asia Minor, right? He didn't go alone. Attalus went with him. Maybe this is an indication, and is often taken so, of how important Attalus had risen at Philip's court. I think maybe it was Philip kicking Attalus upstairs because he's causing trouble. He's getting above himself. Philip has never sent Parmenion help before. And all of a sudden, oh yeah, I'm going to give you Attalus. It's more like, Parmenion, take this guy, keep him out of trouble. So all of this has occurred at some point before Cleopatra's wedding. Okay. So Attalus is not in Pella, or E.G. is where the wedding actually occurs, at the time of Philip's murder. Okay. And on the day after, the wedding is celebrated at night. On the next day, there's to be this big sacrifice in the Aigai Theater, E.G. Theater, and there's a big parade through town, as is often the case before sacrifices, and there are floats, and Diodorus tells us, very interestingly, these are the Hellene 12. Okay, so they're the Olympians known in the south. Now, the Macedonians had a slightly different set of gods. Okay? Hephaestus wasn't very important in Macedonia. Poseidon wasn't very important in Macedonia. Some of the gods had different names. They are known by different names. Aphrodite is Irene. Asclepius is Daron. And it's not so much that they're different, but they have these different names. So it's a little bit different. So here's Philip using the Greeks, the Southern Greek pantheon instead of the Macedonian pantheon. So that must have raised some eyebrows. And coming at the end is a 13th statue of Philip. Now, when I talked about did Alexander think he was a god, I pointed out that this idea of heroizing living human beings predated Alexander. He didn't make it up. What exactly Philip meant by this is a point of no little contention among Alexander's scholars. Or Philip scholars, if you will. Was he treading on the cape of divinity? Was he seeking heroic honors here before he goes over to Persia? Is something else going on? We don't really know. But it is interesting, and it was viewed later as a mark of hubris. Okay. And as Philip is following these, he is being attended by the hypaspis, that's his personal guard. Okay, it was one thing that gets confusing with the whole Pausanias thing. He's called the bodyguard. The problem is the word bodyguard, sematophylax, is the same term used for the seven, the main seven that are the traditional bodyguard of the king, but also for the hypaspis in combat. Thank you, Waldemar Heckel, who points that out in some of his works. So the hypaspis are also the bodyguard. So when they're saying Pausanias is in the bodyguard, that's what they mean. They don't mean he's one of the seven, or at least probably not. He's not that important. And those roles would have, you can't just oust somebody and put somebody else in. Okay? But you could in the hypaspis. So they're probably part of the hypaspis. So would have been guarding Philip during this parade. He needed more than 7 guards. But in the parade, he makes a big deal of saying, I don't need any bodyguards. Okay, so he doesn't actually have the 7 sematophylaces with him. It's just him. And walking in front of him are the 2 Alexanders, that is, Alexander his son and Alexander of Epiros. Okay, because one is the groom, one is the brother of the bride, and also apparently the heir. Okay, Alexander is back into his father's good graces. So some time has passed. Maybe he's been, appropriately contrite for messing up Philip's bridgehead. Who is not included in this is Amyntas, okay, the nephew of Philip. So I find this all very interesting. And as Philip is marching in to the theater, as he's going in the tunnel that leads into the main orchestra area, which is where the dancers would perform. Today, an orchestra in a theater is where the orchestra plays music. But in a Greek theater, this area, right in front of the skene, or the stage, is for the chorus to perform. And this is also an area where there is always a altar for sacrifices. The 12 and number 13, Philip, are arranged around the orchestra area. Here, waiting for Philip. And of course, there would have had all the sacrificial animals coming in. So this is the big sacrifice that is supposed to precede Philip leaving for Asia. And as he is walking out of the tunnel, Pausanias runs up and stabs him in the back. Hollywood, eat your heart out. Okay, I'm not making this up. This happened. In the stands is everybody who is anybody in Greece. They've all been invited to Aigai to witness this huge ceremony of Philip taking off on this campaign of vengeance on behalf of Greece. So all the important people are there. Thousands of people. We don't know how many were there. It's not a huge theater, but it has a hillside. There were thousands of people watching this occur. Okay. Now Pausanias races away out the other tunnel. So he runs across the orchestra out the other tunnel, headed for the exits, the city wall, and the road. Where supposedly, we are told by Diodorus, there are 2 horses waiting, okay, for him. He doesn't make it. He is immediately chased by some of Alexander's friends, Leonidas and Perdiccas among them. And they chase after him. Another kid named Attalus. It is not that other Attalus. Here's the problem with doing Macedonian history. There are so many people with the same name, it gets nutty. So they all chase after Pausanias and spear him, run him through. He trips, falls, they're on him. Okay, and he's dead before he can spill the beans. But he just killed the king. This, you've got to imagine, is a chaotic moment. Because they don't know what's coming next. They don't know why Pausanias did this. They don't know if Pausanias is going to turn around and kill Alexander next. Okay, so everybody's quite startled. We are not told about this chaos. Diodorus doesn't give us the details, but you can imagine how nutty things must have been in that theater at that moment. Okay, and Alexander is acclaimed by one of his cousins, sometimes some spaces removed, a fellow named another Alexander of Lynkestis. Now, this Alexander, his father had been a king before Philip. So these are the Lynkestians that were frequently at war with Lower Macedon prior to Philip bringing them into the fold. And also Philip's mother was from this area, so that they're related to Philip and Alexander. So this Alexander grabs his shield and his spear, and he's banging it on there, because this is how you acclaim a king. This is symbolic. Okay, they're not electing one. This is not a constitutional monarchy. They are saying, I will fight for you. And so Alexander of Lynkestis starts all of this. And the reason I'm emphasizing this guy too is because a little earlier, possibly around the time of the Battle of Chaeronea, about 2 years, possibly 3 years earlier, their father was exiled. And possibly in a power move, he and some friends brought into camp some girls. And Philip had forbidden girls in camp. And he exiles Iropus and says, you're out of here. Guys, this is not about the girls, okay? This is, again, about a power play. Iropus saying, basically, I don't have to listen to you. Okay? Who are you? And Philip shows him who he is and says, get out. So right now, this Alexander is the acting prince of Lynkestis, and he is acknowledging Alexander as king. This will later save his head. Okay. And so Alexander, at barely 20, steps forward to become the new king of Macedon, with his dead father at his feet at this point in time. And we're going to stop there and take up, as I feared we might need to, with a third video in which I dissect who might have killed Philip and why. Other than the obvious, we know who wielded the knife. That is Pausanias. There is no doubt about that. The sources agree on it. We know. The question is, what else might be going on here? Is there a conspiracy? And if there is, who might be involved?